what Donald Trump, you know, the way that Donald Trump is starting his week. And he said in one of his latest posts on Truth Social, he said that the United States of America is in serious discussions with a new and more reasonable regime to end our military operation in Iran. Who is he talking to?
Well, so pull up sonar21.com and look at the cartoon that's at the head of my article. Show that. I think, they say one picture is better than 1,000 words. This summarizes it.
Yeah. This time around is that the market is not reacting to what Donald Trump is saying.
It did. Oh, it did react.
It did react.
Oh yeah, no, it's up. It's up 300. Well, it started off. It was up 400 points, 500 points. Now it's only up 213. So, but are you going to show the cartoon? Can you post it there?
Let me bring it up. I think that's.
I think if people haven't seen this, they need, because this encapsulates what's going on. Donald Trump is talking to himself. What the cartoon is it's got Donald Trump, fat, disheveled guy, laying on a psychiatrist's couch, and the psychiatrist says something to him to the effect, "So these Iranians you're talking to, are they in the room with us now?" Yeah, there we go. Yeah. The Iranians you've been talking to for 2 days, are they in the room with us now? He's delusional. Yeah, he's not talking to Iran. Nobody on his team is talking to any Iranian. If they're giving messages to Pakistan, and Pakistan is passing it on to Iran, and sometimes Iran accepts the message. They go, "Oh, okay," and then other times they say, "No, we're not even interested in the damn thing they have to say." So that's the state of the negotiations, and Trump is trying to pretend that this is, it's like a negotiating for buying a piece of property or negotiating to buy a car. Like say, okay, yeah, you got this really nice home. I'd like to buy it, but I'll pay you $900,000, or the listed price is $900,000. I'll give you $700,000. And no. And so maybe they'll come back and agree that it'll be $800,000. That's not that kind of negotiation at all between Iran and the United States. Iran's position is very clear, and it's spelled out. At a minimum, get all U.S. bases, all U.S. military presence out of the Persian Gulf, lift all the sanctions, pay reparations. Those, I'd say those are the core three. But Iran's not looking to make a deal. Iran is looking to make those conditions permanent. And, they're not going to stop. And that's where Trump and the world is starting to scream in great pain from what's happening economically. And they want it to stop. And even if it stops, the damage that's now been done to the economies of these, I'll call them false countries that are the Gulf states. I mean, let's face it, the Gulf Arabs are like a political version of Disneyland, something that is completely artificially created out of nothing. And, the royal Saud family, a bunch of Bedouin tribesmen, for God's sake, okay? They're, a couple of generations removed from riding camels around the desert and having hawks. And just because they got a lot of money, they get treated as if they're something special. They're not special. And then you go to Qatar and United Arab Emirates, those are completely artificial. I didn't realize this until recently. You got all these big high rises, these magnificent buildings like in Dubai. They don't have a sewage system. I mean, every day trucks pull up and are loaded up with shit, human feces, so they take and dump somewhere in the desert. You know, so they're pretending like they're sophisticated and modern, but you know, it's just they got glorified outhouses, and so you know the people get the poop in their golden toilets. Then it gets flushed down to the bottom, and they get all these slave laborers from Asia that are there to clean up all the Westerners' shit. Sorry to be so crude, but that's what it is. And now here's the UAE and Saudi Arabia. I mean, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, they were like at quote war. They were calling each other names and threatening each other. Now they're together. They're united against Iran. Oh, we're going to attack. We're going to declare war on you, and you'll be sorry, Iran. Oh, please. You know, the UAE isn't even a speed bump in the highway, and they get rolled over by Iran. And Iran's starting to take them apart. I seriously believe that the United Arab Emirates is not going to survive intact as a country, as a nation, whatever it is. It no longer has an economic foundation right now. Its economy, effectively 83% of it has been turned off. It's not operating. Oil exports 25%. That's not going out. International trade at the Jebel Ali, this free trade port, nothing going on there. Tourism, only the sadomasochists are showing up. You know, they want to the ones who want to risk being in a war and getting blown up. Everybody else is getting the hell out. The construction industry's dead. The financial industry dead. So, we're living. I think this is going to be really a watershed week, in the sense that it's the worsening global economic crisis is going to come into focus. Up to this point, Trump was able to play these games. Oh, things are great, man. We're negotiations. This is going to be over. And a lot of the traders on Wall Street and in London were saying, "Oh yeah, this can't last forever. The Iran's, they're destroying so much of Iran. The end is near," and it's not. It's not.
Larry, I think your understanding of these Arab states is so accurate, because you don't see the way that they see themselves is not, based on the reality of who they are.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand your capabilities and your limits. It doesn't seem that they understand that. That's why they're talking about going against Iran. And what would be the benefit for these countries, these UAE, Saudi Arabia, to go against Iran in a long run? These people, I don't know what is happening in mind of decision makers in these countries, but they're so much disconnected with the reality of what's going on.
Well, anybody that's ever been around them, and let me be clear here. This is, I'm not anti-homosexual, but if you've ever around these Gulf Arabs, I mean, here are these guys walking around wearing these white sandals with gold on them. I mean, it really gives off a very, I'll call it, effeminate vibe. And so they're not really a what I'd call a masculine group of people. It's very, it's weird. And the reason I raise that is because within the Islamic culture, it is very much against homosexuality and that kind of practice. Sorry, my dogs, somebody came to the door, and so now they both decide to start hollering. wait, hang on. Let me tell them to shut up.
Yeah.
Okay, they stopped.
That was strong. I heard.
Say what?
Yeah.
Well, hang on for a second. What?
She needs a PIN number.
Oh, 8707.
Yeah.
Sorry about this.
Yeah.
All the distractions. So, but no, they give off, they in their sort of national policies, they're very anti-homosexual, but in their own conduct, they're very, let's say, gay friendly. And you also see this distraction between, or the difference between, they claim to have this strictly religious society, and man, when they get to London, they're chasing whores and they're drinking alcohol, and it's party all the time. And that's actually what happened in Dubai. That Iran has said, jokingly, that, hey, we've gotten, as a result of the war, we've gotten rid of all the prostitutes. So
Yeah.
hang on for a second.
Okay.
5957. Sorry.
Yeah. Larry, the other point that Donald Trump was mentioning in this post today is the case of the Strait of Hormuz. He said that if they don't open it up immediately, we're going to hit all these, electric generating plants on oil wells, oil facilities, together with Clark Island. We're going to go after that as well. But here is what was the response from the Iranians. And they have responded positively, and they're saying they're opening up the Strait of Hormuz. Iran responded positively to Trump's threat and reopened the Strait of Hormuz only for 2 Chinese tankers. So,
well, look, let's recognize the lack of logic and consistency on the part of Donald Trump. I mean, he really is all over the board. Call him two-faced. We can call him Janus, the Roman god that had 2 faces looking in opposite directions. That's Donald Trump. Because 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they lifted all the sanctions on Iran, right? And so that, why? Well, we needed to get more oil out there. We didn't want to have any sanctions that were preventing oil from getting onto the international market. Then here he is now saying, we're going to destroy your oil. So that, remember that oil we 3 weeks ago you said was unsanctioned and you could deliver. Now we're going to destroy it and we're going to remove that from the market. So you're doing that at the very time when, in the last 2 days, the price of oil has gone up. Both Brent and West Texas Intermediate, the futures, they've gone up $2, $3, $4. So it's one's up to like $115, I think, and the other's up to $102. Well, sorry, that's going in the opposite direction. So what is it that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it is. I was just checking the Brent. So the West Texas Intermediate is at 102, and Brent crude is at 114, and Murban crude is at 119. So this is an inflation punch in the gut to the world economy, and that doesn't even begin to capture what the cost of diesel is.
Yeah. Here is Scott Best and Larry talking about the Strait of Hormuz.
Well supplied, and we are seeing more and more ships go through on a daily basis as individual countries cut deals with the Iranian regime for the time being. But over time, the U.S. is going to retake control of the straits, and there will be freedom of navigation, whether it is through U.S. escorts or a multinational escort.
It's amazing, Larry, when you look at the way that Donald Trump is talking about negotiations, Scott Bessent talking about the United States, being in charge of the Strait of Hormuz and controlling everything. It seems to me that we're living in different, sort of universes. They're different from us. They don't, in what universe do they live, in your opinion?
Well,
How accurate is that?
you put that's the right expression. They live in an alternate universe, and it's not reality. The United States already tried to do freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, open that up. How did that turn out? United States failed. They got beat by the Houthis. Well, Iran is much more formidable, much more powerful, and has many more options in its arsenal of weapons and ways to pressure states in the Gulf and to control traffic through the Strait of Hormuz than the Houthis ever did. So the United States failed to open the Red Sea, and here's the Houthis now are threatening to shut it down again as well. So you got two critical waterways, and I guess the last one sort of globally would be the Malaccan Straits, which is over in Asia. So this is really disrupting the global supply chains across the board. It's raising shipping costs. Insurance costs are going through the roof. And then the effect of that on consumers is that it's going to be a combination of much higher prices, or the goods that you need or want aren't there because they haven't been able to be put on a ship and sent forward. I think you muted.
New York Times, Larry, reported that more than 50,000 soldiers so far the United States sent to the Middle East to fight. And how, let's assume Donald Trump finally goes with the decision of invading these islands. 50,000 soldiers, how is that going to play out for Donald Trump? And how is that going to gain something for Donald Trump? Because, we have to see the capabilities of these people, these forces in that island or in some islands in the Persian Gulf, and the outcome politically and militarily for Donald Trump.
Yeah, this opens a whole can of worms in terms of exposing the fact that the United States doesn't even have a plan, doesn't even have a clear objective. Let me take you back, well before you were born, to World War II. The Pacific War had started after the Japanese attacked on December 7th, 1941. And by middle of 42, the United States had put together a group of Marines that were sent to Guadalcanal to take control of that island. Why? What was the objective? The objective was to get control of that airfield, to stop the Japanese from being, because if the Japanese had control of that airfield, they'd be able to then control a lot of the maritime traffic that would be vulnerable to attack. So that it was the clear military objective in the part of the United States: seize that island, get control of the airfield, and then you're able to patrol and limit the movement of the Japanese fleet in that area. You don't have that kind of objective here. Well, okay, what's the objective? Well, open the Strait of Hormuz, except they're talking about attacking Karg Island. Well, Karg Island is well north of the Strait of Hormuz. And so if you're going to attack Karg, then you have to ask the second question: how are you going to get your troops there? If the Marines are going to be used, that means they'll have to sail through the Strait of Hormuz, and if they try that, they'll be sunk. So those Marines will never, those ships carrying the Marines will never make it to Karg Island. So I guess the other option is to fly them into, fly 5,000 Marines in to Saudi Arabia or Kuwait, and then put them on amphibious boats and have them try to go across the Persian Gulf and to land, except then they're going to be vulnerable to attack by drones and missiles from Iran. So the third option is, well, you drop them in via parachute, except that's not the Marines. That's the 82nd Airborne. So and once you seize the island, then what? Well, they're not going to have enough troops to actually fully take control of the island, because there's several thousand Iranian citizens there, and they're going to be fighting back. And then once they get into a fight with the civilians and start killing civilians, that's going to create further international problems for the United States. And the whole question of resupply. How do you resupply? Because any resupply via air is going to be dicey. They'll be facing the risk of being shot down. So then you go down. Let's say, okay, let's say they're going to try to open Keshem, and again, or take Keshem. Keshem's got 150,000 people on it. It's not a small territory, and as I understand it, it is actually connected to the mainland. So it's not a complete island. But okay, let's say you get your troops on that island. Then what? That does not eliminate Iranian drones, Iranian missiles, Iranian mini submarines, Iranian maritime drones. So those four things right there, and not to mention the speedboats, the bog hammers that the Iranians have, they can be used to attack ships. That doesn't, just putting troops on that island doesn't eliminate those threat vectors that Iran can still use to keep the Strait of Hormuz shut. Or let's say they go in and try to take Bandar Abbas. All you've done now is you've created a concentration of U.S. military forces that can be easily and readily attacked. None of this makes any sense militarily. At least you could argue that in World War II in the Pacific, the United States, they hit Guadalcanal, and then they began the island hopping. They decided they could take different islands to secure control of different parts of the Pacific. And in some instances, they realized, hey, all we got to do is just bypass the Japanese. Now, one interesting fact about World War II and in the Pacific, the United States started its operations in New Guinea in end of 1942, I believe. That fighting in Guinea continued until after the dropping of the atomic bombs in Nagasaki. So that was an island that the United States actually never took. And I would argue that this kind of inserting ground forces could be sort of the New Guinea for the United States Marine Corps, where they spent years fighting and not making really any progress to quote, bring about the defeat of Japan. That was one of the most, if you will, meaningless military engagements of World War II. It went on for 3.5 years and accomplished nothing other than getting people killed on both sides.
More recent experience was what has happened in Snake Island. The Ukrainians tried to invade the Snake Island, and then Russia hit them and slaughtered them almost.
Yeah, and then the same happened to Russia. I mean, it was you got this chunk of rock that sits out in the middle of the Black Sea and near the coast of Romania, and whoever gets on top of it, okay, you quote got control of it, but so what? What can you do from there? Because then you're exposed to being hit by missiles, airdrop bombs, or drones.
Yeah, I think, Larry, there is some lessons to be learned, as you mentioned, about the history of these sort of moves if they try to do that. But nobody in the Trump administration would care about what has happened before. You remember when Donald Trump was elected in the United States, they decided to do the same against Yemenis in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
It hexed he did the same thing that the Biden administration tried to do before. And he said, this time around going to be different. We're going to crush them. We're going to destroy them. You don't see the people understanding the reality of their living. They think that they're different. They're more powerful. They're different. Their decision-making system is working better than what it was before. But do you, Larry, today, as we talk today, do you see any military expert in the Trump administration who's able or capable, not just military intelligence, who understands the reality of what's going on, that is able
Well,
to go against the rhetoric in Washington, go against what Donald Trump is suggesting?
none have been out. None have been speaking in public to that effect at all. They're maybe they're saying it behind closed doors, but so far all of the commentary that's being made about putting in ground forces and moving forward on this with this crazy plan, it's all delusional about how great our Marines are and how effective they're going to be, etc. I got a note yesterday from a retired U.S. officer who was in Special Operations Forces, and he had done some. He was in charge of sort of the hunt for Scuds and other things back in 2003 in Iraq, and he noticed that he said there's a real disconnect if you search AI and about the 2003 Special Operations Forces hunt for Scuds and WMD. Oh man, you get these great stories about what was done by the 5th Special Forces Group and by this outfit and that outfit. And he said he said it's all, and I'm quoting him, he says it's all complete bullshit. It's all a lie. That's not what happened. And he shared with me, he says, we received all these WMD target folders that listed every site where they thought WMDs were and what targets we needed to hit. And he said, you know what? Every one of those targets, and he said there were, dozens of, hundreds, quoting him, hundreds of target folders that were prepared by the U.S. Central Command, Defense Intelligence Agency, and the CIA. And he said, not one operational Scud was found from those target folders. Not one. And that's the point, that a lot of times the U.S. military claims that it's acting on the best of intelligence, and it's not the best of intelligence. It's wrong, completely wrong. And so they think, oh yeah, all we got to do is attack Karg Island, and that'll shut off Iran's oil, and Iran will collapse. Or all we got to do is take Keshem Island, and that'll open up the strait. No, just they're acting on bad intelligence.